Bork woke up, gasping for air and waving his hands in all directions to defend himself. It felt like he stopped breathing during sleep. He was sweating all over. He had just encountered another nightmare. This happened almost every night now, and he would be extremely tired during the day. During his dreams, he would somehow die, then trying everything he could to survive, waking up seeming to be the only way out. But there was nothing to do about it now. Just sit here and wait until the sun goes up. Bork was a woodcutter, a hard and heavy worker, a job demanding precision. You needed to hit the right spot, a job demanding endurance, doing the same heavy thing all day. It had gotten harder and harder to stay awake during the day. He lifted his axe up into the air and let it fall down towards the lodge that was about to get sliced in two. He stopped midair before accidentally executing the woman by chopping off her head. Instead of a lodge, there was a naked woman with her hands tied behind her back. She was crying and looking at him with terrified eyes. Her neck was clean and resting on his forest stump, just waiting to be chopped off. "What in the world?" Bork screamed. He closed his eyes and shook his head side to side. When he opened his eyes, the women were gone, and his lodge were back. Was he seeing things now? Bork thought it was indeed hard to keep his eyes open. He went over to the small river. It was a rather cold day, but he forced his head down in the water, pushing himself to stay awake. Adrenaline kicked in, giving him new energy. While he cleaned himself with a towel, something from behind were pulling on his coat. What was going on? He were out here alone. When he turned around, he saw a young boy. "Please give me some food. I am starving," said the boy. It was the weakest, dirtiest beggar boy he ever seen. "Please give me some warm clothes," said the beggar boy. Bork didn't really have much. He was struggling too. Should he really give away his earnings to someone that wouldn't make it anyway? He felt guilty and had to look down. But when he raised his head to confront the boy, the beggar was gone. The boy had felt so real. The woman had also felt so real. He rubbed his eyes and forced himself to stay awake. "I must be dreaming," said Bork towards everything that he now saw. There was now dead bodies everywhere. All the timber that he had collected were chopped off body parts, well sorted in his carrying basket. But he wasn't outside in the forest anymore. He was inside some form of a dungeon, listening to a strange, laughing echo on the walls. Where was he? The laughter didn't sound human. Such a strange vocal sound. It sounded like an animal. With his axe in hand, he walked forward in the halls of shadow and blood. It looked like castle walls. No windows. He must be underground. He shook his head from side to side. This can't be real. It must be a dream. And suddenly he was above ground again, in his forest once more. "It was just a dream," Bork said to himself. "I am exhausted. That is all." He collected his firewood in his carrying basket and went home. Bork was so tired from sleep deprivation that he collapsed in bed. Sleep took him. "Off with their heads!" Bork heard a commanding voice. The voice were laughing and sounded excited. Bork couldn't see or hear where the voice came from, but it was close. "Punish them!" The animalistic command continued. Bork suddenly saw a kneeling naked man, his hand tied behind his back, while he presented his neck, ready. Bork woke up in an instant. He was back in his bed. The sun was going down. He must have slept for several hours, dreaming nightmares again. His clothes were soaked in sweat. Every time he fell to sleep, he woke up from nightmares sweating. He never got used to this, but he started to prepare for it. Bork opened a lid to a barrel filled with cold water and lowered his head under water. He took a glass and drank some cold water to feel awake. He needed to light some candles, because now the sun was going down and it was all getting dark. But suddenly there was a crying voice echoing inside his house walls. It sounded like a small girl. It was a constant crying sound that couldn't be found, even after searching for an eternity and looking through the entire house. Twice, there was nothing. The sound seemed to come from out of nowhere or within his own mind, because when he shut his ears tight with both his hands, he could still hear a child crying. He was squashing his head like if he were crushing a watermelon, but the crying didn't stop. "Isn't this fun, Bork?" said a familiar voice. He recognized that voice. It was the voice that kept laughing in his nightmares. When he opened his eyes, the crying stopped. In front of him, on the opposite side of the table, sat a young, wealthy prince. It was the most beautiful young man he had ever seen. The young man was eating on something. Bork couldn't tell what. "Who are you?" Bork asked. The young prince looked surprised. "Don't you recognize me, Bork, old friend?" Suddenly he was in the other room, a room made of stone, a room made of shadow and blood. There were furniture all over, just like if someone had searched the place. In front of him on the table sat a large dog with the most twisted face, one eye larger than the other, eyes of different color. It had teeth larger than Bork's fingers. It was gnawing on something. Light gave sight of a young woman with her hands tied behind her back. She was screaming and crying in both agony and terror. One of her legs were inside a monstrous dog's mouth. Blood was drooling all over the stony floor. The sight almost made Bork vomit. "Oh, sorry, old friend Bork. Do you want a bite?" the dog said. You speak?" "Yes, but you are a dog." The hyena started to laughter. "I am no dog." Bork shut his eyes and hoping to wake up, and so he did. The next day, Bork woke up and walked out into his forest with his axe in his hand. He was ready to chop off some new firewood, but he wondered from time to time if it was really firewood he was chopping off or something else. Was he truly dreaming that he was in a dark place in a dungeon, or was he actually an executor dreaming that he was a woodcutter?